The Legislative Administration Council of Ecuador's National Assembly admitted the request for impeachment proceedings against the Ecuadorian President Guillermo Lasso. The Venezuelan government fights corruption and wrongdoing, with President Nicolas Maduro at the forefront of the investigations and actions against the scourge. French unions, students and social movements call for a new nationwide demonstration for Thursday to protest Emmanuel Macron's pension reform. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. On Monday, the Legislative Administration Council of Ecuador's National Assembly admitted the request for impeachment proceedings against the Ecuadorian President Guillermo Lasso. With 5 votes in favor and 2 abstentions, the 7 members of the commission decided to send the impeachment request to the Constitutional Court for review. This body has announced 6 days to issue a preliminary ruling on admissibility. In favor of the trial were the President of the Parliament, representatives of the centro-leftist party Unión por la Esperanza, Darwin Pereira, of the indigenous movement Pachacutic, and Esteban Torres of the right-wing Social Christian Party. The President of Ecuador, Guillermo Lasso, is accused of the crimes of bribery, embezzlement, and extortion in what has become known as the Great Godfather corruption case. His brother-in-law, Danilo Carrera, is allegedly the leader of the corruption network. Also, the case investigates a corruption scheme in public companies operating mainly in the National Electricity Corporation and the Electrical Corporation of Ecuador. The President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, presided over a working meeting with the national leadership of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, in which the officials held a first stage of a new offensive against corruption. The head of state indicated that the direct responsibilities for the officials, business persons, and all those involved were established in each one of the investigation fronts. In addition, he stated that restructuring has already begun at the highest level in the country's oil industry and in the courts of the Republic. In this sense, Maduro commented that he has been in charge of the investigations in collaboration with the Attorney General's office and the anti-corruption police, with which he has been able to divide these corruption mafias and have become entrenched in the economic system of Venezuela.
The fight against corruption and the corrupt, against banditry, against those who steal from the people, wherever they are, wherever they come from, wherever they believe. I have been giving full information to the extended political bureau of the Bolivarian Revolution of all the investigation that I have conducted personally with the National Anti-Corruption Police, with the Bolivarian National Intelligence Service, and with the other investigative bodies to dismantle these corruption mafias that have become entrenched in an important sector of the economic apparatus, the judicial apparatus, and the political apparatus in Venezuela.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro also addressed the resignation of oil minister Tarek El Aizami, highlighting the official support of the ongoing investigations.
Minister Tarek El Aizami has made known through social networks. He has informed me of his resignation as Minister of Petroleum and his willingness, as he has shown, to provide all the information he has and to support all the investigation against these groups of bandits and mafia. He has ratified his condition of revolutionary and is willing to cooperate in all the investigation. I have decided to accept the resignation as Minister of Energy and Petroleum to facilitate all the investigation that must result in the establishment of the truth, the punishment of the guilty, and justice in all these cases. Over these fronts that we have opened in the battle against corruption.
The Venezuelan president also called for justice against the acts of corruption perpetrated against the country by the far-right extremists.
The bandit and thief Juan Guaidó, who should be behind bars for a long time, I asked for justice. I asked for justice for the money stolen by the far-right wing, which has also outraged so much by those who were able to sanction measures against the Venezuelan economy, against the people of Venezuela. Those bandits were the ones who requested all the sanctions that have done so much damage to our country, which we are facing and advancing in a certain process to recover growth and build a new economic and social prosperity that we are going to build, that we are going to live, that we are going to have.
And as confirmed by the Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, the government is taking a stance against corruption in the country. A report from our correspondent Adriana Sibori brings us the latest on the subject.
The President of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, confirmed that judges, businessmen and government officials linked to the state oil company PDVSA have been arrested on corruption charges. The president assured that investigations will continue and will get to the bottom of the problem, and at the same time announced restructurings at all levels within the state-owned oil company if necessary. So far, those arrested are the country's superintendent of cryptocurrency and 3 judges, all for embezzlement and corruption, as well as 1 person accused of links to organized crime. However, it was announced that there will be new arrests. In this context, the Venezuelan president confirmed he accepted the resignation of sectoral vice president of the economy and minister of oil Tarek El Aissami, who resigned from his post through social networks and agreed to cooperate with the investigations into corruptions within PDVSA. In addition, the head of state confirmed that justice should not only reach state officials but also those who have requested sanctions against Venezuela and stolen money delivered by the United States that belongs to the country. He directly singled out former opposition deputy Juan Guaidó, stating that he should be in prison. Investigations are underway since October, and the public ministry reported 27 arrests for corruption in PDVSA since 2017.
Let's take a short break. But first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva relaunched the Mize Medicals program, a More Doctors in English, which seeks to bring basic health services to some 96 million Brazilians living in the country's most isolated areas.
Medicals program is returning with exceptional care, very great care. We want all the doctors who apply to Mize Medicals program to be Brazilians. If there are no Brazilian doctors candidates for the Mize Medicals program, we will call for foreign doctors to take on this task, because what matters for us is not the doctor's nationality, but the patient's nationality, who is Brazilian, who needs health care.
And the government of Argentina has intervened energy company Elizur following repeated power cuts over the last few weeks. Administration officials said the national electricity regulator body has been instructed to proceed with a 180-day intervention in the company Elizur. Officials said the purpose of the intervention is to monitor retrofit works for the company to improve the quality of their service. Company spokesperson said that the intervention will not affect the property rights of the shareholders nor the terms of the concession contract, but that through the intervention the state will carry out an effective monitoring of contract compliance and improvement of services. Cuba and Venezuela rejected the latest report on human rights of the United States Department and denounced that Washington uses the issue of human rights as a tool of political convenience. A Tuesday's communique from the Venezuelan Foreign Ministry pointed out that the U.S., in spite of maintaining a permanent aggression against the rights of the Venezuelan people, pretends to qualify the actions of other governments. The document denounces the brutal war that the White House waged exactly 20 years ago against the Iraqi people, causing hundreds of thousands of deaths, implementing torture methods, and using weapons of war against civilians, confirming that for Washington, human rights are simply a tool used for its political convenience based on distorted narratives. For his part, Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez denounced as unacceptable the slanders against the country that appear in the U.S. government's Human Rights 2022 report. He also said on his Twitter account that with the shameful record of violations and abuses against its own citizens, the North American nation should refrain from stigmatizing others. The presidents of Russia and China signed important bilateral agreements in Moscow on Tuesday. Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping met on Tuesday in Moscow on the second day of the state visit of the Chinese leader to the Russian Federation. The Kremlin said that President Putin is on the verge of signing a dozen documents, including 2 declarations on strengthening strategic cooperation and plans for economic interaction until 2030. During Monday's talks, the leaders discussed the peace plan for Ukraine proposed by China, as well as economic issues and other joint projects. Xi Jinping declared on Monday that he chose Russia as the first country to visit after his re-election because both nations are great powers and strategic partners. And China's President Xi Jinping arrived in the Kremlin on Tuesday for informal talks with his Russian counterpart. During the meeting, the 2 leaders discussed China's peace plan for Ukraine. The Kremlin said they held a deep exchange of views on the Ukrainian issue, with the aim of seeking a peaceful solution to the conflict. Xi assured that China will play a constructive role in promoting a political solution to the tensions with Ukraine, as most states supported peace talks. According to reports, the signing of 2 joint declarations and some 10 intergovernmental agreements is expected. A joint statement highlights that strengthening ties is a necessity, taking into account the current context and the prevailing trends in the world. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China, Wang Wenbin, stressed on Tuesday the Eastern nations' will to promote negotiation and peaceful talks between the parties involved in the Ukrainian conflict.
The president of China, Xi Jinping, emphasized that on the issue of Ukraine, there have been more peaceful and regional voices. Most countries support easing tensions, advocate promoting negotiation and peaceful talks, and oppose adding fuel to the fire. In history, the resolution of conflicts ultimately requires dialogue and negotiations. Not long ago, China issued a position paper on the Ukrainian current crisis, calling for a political solution, opposing the Cold War mentality and opposing unilateral sanctions.
The spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry also expressed his hope that the trip of the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida to Ukraine will serve to cool the situation and not the opposite.
The community should maintain the position of promoting peace talks and creating a situation for the political resolution of the crisis in Ukraine. We hope that Japan can do more to de-escalate the situation rather than the other way around.
We move on to Europe. On Monday, the French government survived 2 no-confidence motions lodged by opposition groups, with one failing by just 9 votes in the 577-seat National Assembly. The official adoption of the reform on Tuesday is unlikely to diffuse the biggest internal crisis since Macron's re-election last year, with daily protests across the cities and across the country turning violent at times. The pension reform is thus considered approved, although several opposition groups have lodged appeals with the Constitutional Council. Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne has assured that she will continue her reform program, and the President Macron has called a meeting on Tuesday at the Elysur with the parliamentary leaders of the parties that still support his weakened government. And the French President Emmanuel Macron will give a televised interview on Wednesday in which he will try to calm public anger over his pension reform and cool spiraling protests and strikes. Police arrested another 234 people in Paris on Monday night during tense clashes between protesters and security forces. The latest unrest comes after Macron's government narrowly survived two no-confidence motions in Parliament on Monday, meaning legislation to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64 looks all but certain to take effect. A poll on Sunday showed the president's personal rating at its lowest level since the height of the anti-government Yellow Vests protest movement in 2019, with only 28% of respondents having a positive opinion of him. TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries through StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe issued a video statement following the International Monetary Fund's approval of a $2.9 billion bailout for the country, raising hopes of easing the island nation's economic crisis.
The approval of this deemed credit facility by the Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund. With the receipt of this loan facility, Sri Lanka has been assured by the international community that it has the capacity to restructure the debt. The world has accepted that Sri Lanka is no longer a bankrupt country, and thus the country has the ability to begin normal transactions. Following the receipt of the loan facility from the International Monetary Fund, with the improvement of the foreign exchange situation, the government is working to gradually remove import restrictions on essential supplies, medicines, and goods required for tourism.
A Sudanese opposition group demonstrated against the agreement reached between the de facto government and some political organizations to return to the democratic process. The group, known as the Democratic Bloc, which includes several national figures and smaller political parties. Meanwhile, the spokesperson for the political forces or the process in Sudan, Khaled Omar Youssef, announced that the different parties involved in the country's transition process agreed to sign a final agreement on April the 1st, paving the way for the transfer of power to civilians. The negotiations for the final agreement, brokered by the United Nations, aim at holding elections by the end of 2023 to form a civilian government.
We at the Democratic Bloc did not sign the framework agreement. We are not accepting it. We reject it. We do not accept the lawyer's draft. We have our point of view on the days that we were not consulted on. It is not accepted by us. I think any group forming an authority without an agreement with the other political powers would lead the country into darkness. We hope that the brothers will sit down with their fellow Sudanese partners and come to an agreement with them. It is a big mistake for them to think they can forcefully rule the country.
Afghanistan's schools reopened on Tuesday for the new academic year, but no classes were held as students were unaware of the start, and hundreds of thousands of teenage girls remain banned from attending classes. Currently, Afghanistan is the only country in the world where girls are prohibited from going to secondary school. Taliban authorities have imposed an austere interpretation of the Islam since returning to power in August 2021 after the withdrawal of the United States military that backed the previous governments. Meanwhile, schools were also reopened in provinces including Herat, Kunduz, Ghazni and Bagdashan, but no lessons were held there either. The start of the new academic year coincided with Nowruz, the Persian New Year, celebrated widely in Afghanistan before the Taliban returned to power, but now unacknowledged by the country's new rulers. Now we move on to other topics. On Monday, authorities of Malawi raised to 499 the death toll after Tropical Cyclone Freddy, in addition to 1,332 injured and 427 missing. The information was released by the Department of Disaster Management. As of March 20th, Malawi had 508,244 displaced people distributed among 534 temporary camps. The Malawi Army and Police, assisted by the relief workers from the United Kingdom, continue search and rescue operations, while helicopters sent by Tanzania and Zambia are transporting emergency aid to inaccessible areas and evacuating people in need of medical attention to the Queen Elizabeth Central Hospital in the city of Blantyre. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.